course, this is always one of the real highlights of the year for me. Because we celebrate what students in the Institute or linked to the Institute are doing, and you all come from different academic departments. You work in the Institute, and under the auspices of the Institute's Transformation Committee, which, as you know, is now transformation in its broadest sense permeates every facet of what we do in the Institute. We launched a couple of years ago a program for recognizing publications by postgraduate students, and we recognize that people publish in two areas. They publish their original research, but often writing up a PhD, the introduction gives material for review articles. And so we found that people are very active in both of these areas, writing original research as well as review articles. Getting your work out there so that people can read it is just an absolutely critical part of being a scientist. And so it's always thrilling for us to see who is writing, what are they writing. You know, we recognize publications in which a student is the first author. Understanding that science today is complicated. There's a lot of teamwork that goes into science, but the principle still holds. If you're the first author, you've done most of the work and made huge intellectual as well as practical contributions to that particular study. So it is my pleasure, as has been in the last few years, to introduce the selection panel, who had the responsibility of reading all of the submissions, and they were all outstanding, reading all of the submissions and then making that very difficult choice as to decide which paper warrants first, second, third prize, and so on. So firstly, Emeritus Professor Simon Gordon from University of Oxford. Simon has been the chair of the International Scientific Advisory Committee of the Institute, I believe, since inception. He's certainly been the chair of this committee since I have been the director of the Institute. And Simon is a UCT graduate. He also has an honorary degree from UCT, and he's a fellow of the Royal Society, an extremely distinguished, really world famous immunologist and clinician. And so Simon is the first judge, and the second judge is Emeritus Professor Wieland Gierwes. I think anybody at UCT who doesn't know Wieland simply doesn't know the history of UCT. Wieland Gierwes was a deputy vice chancellor. He was also created the Department of Medical Biochemistry. He ran MRC research units both at Stellenbosch and at UCT. And very importantly, he's held in huge positions in building the science research ecosystem of South Africa through the Academy of Science, amongst many other contributions that he's made. Importantly, with respect to the Institute, the IDM was the vision of Professor Gierwes. He dreamed about it, he thought about it, he did all of the hard work to raise the funding. Those of you who sit in and walk through the Wolfson Pavilion, the funding for that pavilion came through Wieland's hard work. He was the interim director of the Institute before Greg Hussey took over. And I have every reason to believe that he really loves what we have done in the last few years. And in many ways, seeing his vision being realized through the work of people such as yourself. So we have invited today, both Wieland and Simon will give some comments about overall what they thought about the Institute. But we've invited you along, you as the students, this is your day, along with your supervisors, because we also recognize that your achievements in many, many ways is due to the phenomenal support, encouragement, and mentorship that you've received from your supervisors. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to Simon, I believe. Thank you.
No, Wieland is going to be first.
Oh, Wieland will go first. Thanks, Wieland.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Valerie. And if I can do a kind of a bow before the screen to all the candidates and all the supervisors of these magnificent papers and this magnificent work. I'm always thrilled every year to be re-asked to be a member of this panel. because it gives me opportunity to see what is happening and to read about the work that is going on, the diverse work, purposeful work, excellent work, advanced work that is going on. I'd like to remind you that apart from what Valerie has said, I'm also a little bit of a dinosaur, a scientific dinosaur, because when I began my career 60 years ago, the methods that we were using were methods that none of you probably has ever even heard of. We used manometers to measure gas pressure changes. To measure radioactivity in a single sample required putting the sample into a vial, measuring the background radiation as well as the sample radiation, and doing elaborate statistics on both numbers until we were able to say this is the radioactivity here. One sample had to be done by hand using a statistical manipulation to get an answer, and so on and so forth. So I've come from that long road through the scientific advances that have happened. And for me, it is a rejuvenation to be able to read about your work. And it's an incredible experience. So I really just want to say it is a wonderful pleasure and an honor and an absolute experience to be able to read your fantastic papers. Now, every year, Simon and I come to the conclusion that all the work is excellent, and it's almost impossible to look at the razor-fine distinctions between them that might justify a prize being given, a first prize being given, or a second prize, or whatever. Now, we have agreed on a particular set of criteria, which we don't apply rigidly, but we apply them contextually and carefully. And we do our evaluations separately, and then we consider them together. Now, in terms of the published original articles, which is the main number of submissions, we have the first criterion is obviously hugely important. It is the scientific quality of the paper. The question that is being asked, the way the question is being answered or attempted to be answered, and the design of the research work, the execution of the research work, and the drawing of the conclusion. So it's the quality of the science, if we can use the word science in that sense, the quality of the paper as a contribution to the scientific literature and to the field in which the work is being done. Then we have to, because most of the papers are multi-author, I can't even remember a single paper being by a single author. So always more than one author, because you're also doing supervised work, your postgraduate students. And so sometimes there are a huge number of authors. So we have to try to see to what extent you personally can get the credit for the article. And there we look at what your supervisor says about your contribution. We look at what the authorship, how the authorship has been agreed. If it's, for example, agreed by all the authors that you are the first author, well, that is already a very telling comment on how much you've contributed. And then we also look at the attributions. In most articles, you indicate who has contributed what to the paper. And it's very important there that we look to see that you actually drafted the paper or most of it, and we're in oversight of the process of getting a paper to the point where it was submitted to the journal and where questions raised by reviewers had to be dealt with, etc. So that's the second item. We try to be very fair and look at that in a way that compares different people in different situations. The third is that we try to look at the methodological aspect. I mentioned my own dinosaur experience in methodology. You people are now using very, very different methodologies. We try to see to what extent you have selected methodology, used it, applied it, modified it, and made it work to give you the results that you wanted and needed. And so that's a technical side, which is also important. And the last side is the style and the layout and the way in which the argument has been made for the conclusion that you've reached. And so those are the four criteria for an article. As I say, we try to do it semi-numerically. We judge each criterion between 0 and 5. And it's amazing how we always start talking about 3.75 and 3.80 and things like that, trying to dodge the fact that our scale is really between 4 and 5 for most of you guys. And nobody even thinks about naught. I'm reminded how in the Senate once, when we were talking about exam results, the head of the Department of English announced to Senate that his department marks between 43% and 74%. That was the range in which they marked. And so we are all very critical, of course, in the Senate. The mathematicians say that's completely ridiculous, etc. But I just want to tell you it's very difficult what we were doing. Now, if I come to the reviews, there were fewer reviews, but they are absolutely first rate as well. In the case of reviews, we look at how the authors have assembled the material, how they have selected material to include, how they've assembled it into a proper review, which makes an argument, which comes to conclusions, which this is a second criterion, which comes to a synthesis, a new insight that is more than just assembling a lot of papers and saying, this guy said this, but that guy said that. And this guy thought it maybe was different. You've got to be able to say the evidence in favor of this guy's view is not sound for these reasons. And this guy's view has got much better reasons, but I'm not completely convinced, etc. So you have to be able to make a synthesis of what ultimately you think is the message coming through the review. And then we also look at the contribution of the author, because some of the reviews are multi-author. It's less multi-author than usual, usually maybe 2 or 3. But again, we have to look at what your contribution is using the same methods that I mentioned before. And then we come to the layout and the way in which the whole thing has been set out in such a way that it's readable, because many reviews are so dense, include so many things and do them so hurriedly in such a scruffy way that one gets lost and gives up reading after a while. So it has to be written in a literate and powerful argumentative way. And that way, so we look at the style and the layout and the way the whole thing has been done. And again, we have these razor sharp differences. But nevertheless, ultimately, by give and take and sharing each other's viewpoints, and also in some cases bowing to the more detailed and deep knowledge that one or the other of us may have in a particular field concerned, we then reach a particular conclusion and we decide on who should get which prize, etc. But I do want to say that all the work that you've done is superb. It is absolutely mind-blowing, and it's been a great experience, and I want to thank and acknowledge that before I hand over to Simon to give you the actual outcomes. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll keep you in suspense for a moment longer. I'll just reminisce a bit. Wieland is the senior in that he graduated from medical school 1 year ahead of me, but we really became friends later on through visits in Oxford and also in New York, where we ended up at the same university. Now, Wieland was trained by a very hard taskmaster in how to write and judge papers, because he described in one of his memoirs how Hans Krebs, who was his supervisor at Oxford, would make correction marks all over his drafts and so on, and really wasn't satisfied with anything, although he wasn't even a native English speaker himself. In any case, as you know, you already don't know, is that the concept of the Institute is very much what was regarded as Wieland's folly, according to the previous Vice-Chancellor. In any case, it's been brilliantly successful, and I'm very proud now, especially this year when Val's completed a 10th year, I think it is, and gave the Wolfson lecture, and it really was amazing to see what's been done. And it's been vindicated, all this, if you look at the output now with the new variant of COVID in South Africa, how much and how quickly the world is appreciative of what's happening in South African science and medical science. So I found the papers nice and varied. I was pleased to see that not everyone was talking about COVID, for example, and there's a range of publications in a range of different journals as well. So that's nice to see. They were uniformly of a very high standard, as Wieland said, And I think it's just all I can say is they're very professional. And over the few years we've done this, it's clear that it's coming of age, and it's now almost a standard, an average level rather than just one or two exceptional ones. Now, the work itself is important, and we've tried to favor also areas which are not only trendy and topical, but actually will also contribute to practice later on, be translational, if you like, later on as well. And of course, it's been very well presented and executed. So I'm pretty proud of being part of the IDM family, if you like. And I just hope the next 20 odd years will live up to the fantastic example that's been set by Wieland and Greg and Valerie. So I won't keep you in suspense any longer. I'll start out with the original research papers first. And the first one, we decided we couldn't split between two people. So a joint first, it'll be Arash and Ryan. I can pronounce the surnames as well, but I'll maul it, so I think you'll all know who you are. And this deals with SARS-CoV-2 variant, of course, of concern in South Africa, and on TB, and both of those have internationally significant contributions to the field, very much so. The second prize is for Chaleka, and this is another TB paper, and it was a particular one of, I think, several she submitted, and this is the one in e-biomedicine, which we favored. Now, the third, we also have two joint winners, Aranau and Terry. And I believe Terry is near me somewhere in London, so make contact. We can actually talk about this. And what was nice about those, they both dealt with slightly unusual topics. The first one was a warfarin pharmacological genetic study. And the second one was a bacteriologic study, a pure bacteriology study of de novo cobalamin synthesis and so on. And then for the reviews, we have two, and this was also difficult to discriminate if one can, but the first one we decided was Liam Devenish's contribution, and the second one was Sherazan, and that was about HIV in low and middle income countries. I didn't know what this LMIC stood for until I read this paper. Any case, congratulations to everybody. And of course, congratulations to all the supervisors, because I was pleased to see people that I'd originally interacted with when I ran my very first workshop in Cape Town at the beginning of the HIV outbreak when T cells were still a rarity and CD4 cells were pretty much unknown. Any case, sorry there weren't any macrophage papers this time, but they got close to it and they all come into it. As you know, it's my passion. Well, I think I'd like to congratulate everybody yet again and thank Wieland and Val for the wonderful contributions they've made to this, I think, remarkable phase in South African medical science and research, and translational too. Somebody's muted.
Me, that's me.
Okay.
Thank you so much to both of you. A huge congratulations to all the winners.